So I think, we've been seeing ongoing displacement within Mali since 2012, but really since the last 3 months of 2018, there has been a big increase in the level of displacement. And so that has continued through into the first 3 months of 2019. And we're seeing on average 28,000 people a month now being displaced from their homes in central and northern Mali.
All right then, but last year we saw about 145,000 people affected. From the way things are evolving so far in this first quarter of the year, do you think we might see that level going on in the full year of 2019?
Certainly. I mean, already this year we've reached 60% of the level of displacement seen last year. So our assessment is that unless there's a dramatic change in the underlying security situation, we would anticipate that there will be continuing high levels of displacement through the year, and we will exceed dramatically the level of displacement that we had in 2018.
All right, so can you help me appreciate the complexity of the conflicts happening in the G5 Sahel region?
So certainly from the Mali context, we have a very complicated and multi-layered security situation here. So there are multiple actors in the security environment here. On the state side, you've got the government of Mali, along with MINUSMA and the Barkhane French forces, the G5 forces also here. And then in addition to that, there are a high number of different types of non-state armed groups. Some of them are jihadists, some are auto-defense, but you have a complicated mix of groups, and so you have both extremist elements, but also elements that are linked to inter-community violence.
All right, then, would you say that we've seen any form of improvement since 2012?
I think the situation has evolved, and so we have a different situation now, where you have localized groups taking action at village level, and that is certainly creating huge difficulties for the population.
So we're seeing this conflict affecting over 7 million people so far, and we're seeing a huge percentage of this, more than half of that is women. How is this? How does this impact your humanitarian work in the region?
So I think the thing that we're really trying to focus on is ensuring that people have access to basic rights and services. And when we talk about 7 million affected, it's people who are unable to feed themselves and their families to an appropriate level, people who can't access health services, education, who maybe don't have access to a birth certificate or to an identity document that allows them access services. And the insecurity then means for people who have been displaced that they will have fled and left all their personal belongings, their way of generating an income, and certainly their identity documents behind. For people who are hosting, they're often already very vulnerable in their communities. They will have already limited amounts of food and the possibility to produce food, and then to have to host additional families creates a significant additional burden on those families. So, and then the additional complication is, of course, the need for additional funding to support families who find themselves from one day to the next without the limited assets and wealth that they've accumulated over time, without anything, and in need of even just the basic pots and pans to be able to cook some food, to get a food ration, to be able to feed their children. And these are significant needs for families who are displaced.
All right, so for the displaced families, though, that kind of imagine the insecurity and the breakdown of law and order is affecting things. So I wish we're not going to be facing a food crisis in the near term.
So I think that it's never certain, because also, of course, Mali is being affected by climate change. And whereas there were good rains last year, some of the impact of those rains were to damage harvest. So I think that certainly looking at this year compared to last year, at this stage before the start of the hungry season, there would have been more optimism that the hungry season wouldn't have been as dramatic or as dangerous for the more vulnerable people. But part of what's going on with the insecurity in the centre and the north of the country is that people's grain stores are being burnt, so their stocks to keep them fed over the hungry period are also being destroyed.
All right. I also understand that your capacity to respond to the humanitarian crisis is also weakening. What kind of support do you think we need from the international community?
So I think that certainly what we've been highlighting, along with the other partners who are involved in the rapid response mechanism here in Mali, is that the capacity to respond to additional and increasing displacement is limited because of the dramatic increase in the numbers displaced. So, you know, when you submit your budgets and make your plans, you do it on the basis of the best available information, which was at a much lower level of displacement through the course of the first 9 months of last year. So there's an urgent need for additional humanitarian funding to come into Mali to ensure that the families who are most in need of assistance are assisted, and that in their displacement they have the essential elements to be able to survive.
But when you look at the environment, though, I'm also curious about the safety of your operatives.
So I think it is a very complicated environment, and we are very conscious of the need to understand the situation and to make sure that we don't put our staff at risk on the ground, while at the same time making sure that we do fulfill our humanitarian objective to provide assistance to those most in need. So we do our best to check information with all actors that we have access to. And in addition to military actors and community leaders, local government, we also have a system of village monitoring that is linked to the rapid response mechanism, but can also give us some information if there is a reason why we shouldn't travel to a particular community on a particular day. But certainly, you know, the military operations that are ongoing do impact on access to some communities in the country, mostly in the border regions to the east of the country.